You've been taught that vulnerability creates connection. They sold you this lie in self-help books, relationship courses, and therapy sessions. They told you that opening your heart builds bridges, that sharing your pain creates intimacy, that emotional transparency is the foundation of love. They lied to you. Watch what actually happens when you withdraw. Watch how they circle you when you become unreachable. Watch how their desperation grows when you stop explaining yourself. Stop justifying your actions. Stop apologizing for your existence. The man who reveals nothing becomes the riddle they cannot solve, and what cannot be solved becomes an obsession. You've been conditioned to spill your secrets like wine on white cloth, to pour out your feelings like water from a broken dam, to expose your vulnerabilities like wounds seeking bandages. You believed this was strength. You thought this was connection. You imagined this was love, but observe the world with clearer eyes. The people who command attention, who inspire obsession, who create desperate longing, they are not the ones who reveal everything. They are the ones who reveal nothing. They are not the open books. They are the locked vaults. They are not the transparent windows. They are the one-way mirrors. You are not cold by accident. You are strategic by design. Your silence is not emptiness, is fullness contained. Your distance is not cruelty, is power preserved. Your unavailability is not weakness, it is strength weaponized. They will tell you that walls are meant to be torn down, that barriers are meant to be crossed, that fortresses are meant to be conquered. They will use words like intimacy and connection and vulnerability to convince you to lower your defenses. But the fortress stands not because it fears attack, it stands because it understands value. What is easily accessed loses its worth. What is constantly available becomes background noise. What is always open becomes taken for granted. Your inner world is not public property. Your emotional landscape is not a tourist destination. Your deepest thoughts are not entertainment for others' curiosity. Your pain is not content for their consumption. The transformation begins with understanding this fundamental truth. Mystery creates magnetism, while transparency creates contempt. The known becomes boring. The unknown becomes irresistible. Today, you stop being the man who explains himself. Today you stop being the person who justifies his choices. Today you stop being the individual who apologizes for his existence. Today you become the fortress they cannot breach, the puzzle they cannot solve, the mystery they cannot unravel. It's 2 a.m. and she's lying next to you in the darkness. The intimacy of the moment feels like safety, like invitation, like the perfect time to share what you've never shared before. So you begin to spill your fears like secrets into her ear. You tell her about your childhood wounds, the father who left, the mother who criticized, the bullies who broke your confidence piece by piece. You confess your insecurities, the imposter syndrome that haunts your career, the body image issues that plague your mirror time, the social anxiety that makes parties feel like warfare. You reveal your financial struggles, the debt that keeps you awake, the job you hate but can't leave, the dreams you've abandoned because they seemed impossible to afford. You share your relationship history, the women who hurt you, the trust that was broken, the promises that were lies. You believe transparency is strength. You think honesty builds trust. You imagine that showing her your scars will make her love your skin. But watch what happens in the days that follow. She doesn't lean closer. She steps back. She doesn't ask deeper questions. She changes subjects. She doesn't reward your vulnerability with increased intimacy. She punishes it with subtle distance. What you thought was connection becomes the inventory of your weaknesses. What you imagined was trust becomes the catalogue of your flaws. What you believed was intimacy becomes the evidence of your inadequacy. You've handed her a map to your vulnerabilities, a blueprint of your breaking points, a manual for your manipulation. Every fear you shared becomes a button she can push. Every insecurity you revealed becomes a weapon she can wield. Every wound you exposed becomes a target she can hit. The confession trap is the cruelest, because it feels like love while functioning as self-sabotage. The moment of sharing feels profound, meaningful, connecting, but its aftermath is always the same. The mystery dies, the challenge disappears, the hunt ends. She wanted to discover your depths, not have them dumped on her lap like homework. She wanted to unravel your complexity, not be handed a list of your simplicities. She wanted to solve the puzzle of you, not be given all the pieces at once. The moment you become fully known, you become fully disposable. The riddle that is solved loses its fascination. The book that is finished gets returned to the shelf. The game that is won stops being played. Your vulnerability was supposed to create intimacy, but intimacy requires mystery. Your honesty was supposed to build trust, but trust requires the unknown. Your transparency was supposed to foster connection, but connection requires the unrevealed. Mystery dies in the confession booth of your bedroom. The man who tells all becomes the man who means nothing. Stop confessing, start concealing. Let them wonder what lies beneath the surface you show them. The depths of your pain are not conversation starters, they are your private sanctuary. The history of your wounds is not relationship content, it is your personal property. Keep your scars to yourself. Let them imagine what battles you've fought. Let them wonder what storms you've survived. Let them question what depths you contain. The unknown man becomes the unforgettable man. Your phone buzzes and you answer immediately. She texts and you respond within minutes. She calls with a crisis and you drop everything to be her emotional rescue service. You've made yourself available at every call, every text, every manufactured emergency. You bend your schedule around her moods like a tree that grows crooked to reach the sun. When she's sad, you cancel plans to comfort her. When she's stressed, you reschedule meetings to support her. When she's bored, you abandon your goals to entertain her. You think constant presence equals care. You believe availability demonstrates love. You imagine that being always there proves your value. But presence without absence has no value. What is always accessible becomes background noise. You've become emotional wallpaper, noticed only when you're gone, appreciated only in retrospect, valued only after loss. The economics of desire operate on scarcity, not abundance. What is rare becomes precious. What is common becomes worthless. What is always available becomes never appreciated. You've trained her to expect your immediate response, your instant availability, your constant accommodation. You've created a pattern where your time has no boundaries, your attention has no limits, your energy has no protection. She learns to take you for granted, not because she's cruel, but because you've taught her that you can be taken for granted. She stops appreciating your presence because your presence never stops being present. She stops valuing your attention because your attention is never withheld. The man who is always there is never truly wanted because wanting requires the possibility of not having. Desire cannot exist without the fear of loss. Appreciation cannot develop without the experience of absence. You've eliminated the very dynamics that create attraction. You've removed the tension that generates interest. You've destroyed the mystery that maintains fascination. When she knows you'll always answer, she stops being excited when you call. When she knows you'll always be available, she stops being grateful for your time. When she knows you'll always accommodate, she stops being impressed by your flexibility. Your constant availability sends a message you never intended, that you have nothing more important to do than serve her needs, that your time has no other valuable uses, that your attention has no other worthy recipients, that your life has no other meaningful priorities. This devalues not just your time, but your entire existence. If you can always be there for her, then being there for her means nothing. If you can always drop everything for her, then dropping everything for her proves nothing. If you can always accommodate her, then accommodating her signifies nothing. Scarcity creates value. Absence creates appreciation. Distance creates desire. The man who disappears occasionally becomes the man who is desperately missed. The person who is sometimes unavailable becomes the person whose availability is treasured. The individual who maintains boundaries becomes the individual whose boundary crossing feels special. Stop being constantly available. Start being strategically absent. Let your presence become a gift rather than a guarantee. When you're scarce, you become sacred. When you're rare, you become remarkable. When you're unavailable, you become unforgettable. The mirage of constant presence is the illusion that more equals better. But in the economics of the heart, less often equals more. You ask her opinion about your career choices, seeking her approval before making decisions that will shape your future. You share your dreams tentatively, watching her face for signs of encouragement or dismissal. You run your thoughts past her like a student seeking teacher approval. You've made her opinion the North Star of your decisions, her validation the fuel of your confidence, her approval the foundation of your self. Every choice filters through her perspective. Every plan requires her endorsement. Every action seeks her blessing. But dependency disguised as love becomes repulsion. When you need her validation to feel worthy, you've already lost her respect. She doesn't want to be your mother, constantly reassuring an insecure child. She doesn't want to be your therapist, constantly healing your wounded ego. She doesn't want to be your mirror, constantly reflecting back your value. She wants to be intrigued by your independence, not burdened by your insecurity. The man who constantly seeks approval reveals that he lacks self-approval. The person who needs external validation advertises his internal emptiness. The individual who requires others' opinions to form his own confesses that he has no opinions worth forming. You've reversed the natural order of attraction. Instead of her seeking your approval, you seek hers. Instead of her wanting your validation, you want hers. Instead of her trying to impress you, you try to impress her. This reversal creates a psychological dynamic that kills desire. She begins to see you as beneath her rather than beside her. She starts to view you as a follower rather than a leader. She perceives you as insecure rather than confident. Your need for her validation makes her validation less valuable. If someone who needs approval gives approval, what does that approval mean? If someone who lacks confidence offers confidence, what does that confidence worth? If someone who questions their own worth affirms your worth, what does that affirmation signify? That validation addiction creates a downward spiral. The more you seek her approval, the less her approval means. The less her approval means, the more you seek it. The more you seek it, the less attractive you become. The less attractive you become, the less likely you are to receive it. You've become a psychological beggar, extending your hand for emotional coins from someone whose respect you're simultaneously losing. Every request for validation is evidence that you don't validate yourself. Every need for her opinion is proof that you don't trust your own judgment. Independence creates intrigue. Self-validation creates attraction. Internal confidence creates external magnetism. The man who knows his own worth doesn't need others to confirm it. The person who trusts his own judgment doesn't need others to approve it. The individual who validates himself doesn't need others to validate him. When you stop seeking her approval, she starts seeking yours. When you stop needing her validation, she starts needing your attention. When you stop asking for her opinion, she starts offering it without being asked. The psychological tables turn when you turn away from needing her. Psychological support: make your own decisions, trust your own judgment, validate your own worth. Let her wonder what you think of her choices instead of wondering what she thinks of yours. Let her seek your approval instead of you seeking hers. Let her need your validation instead of you needing hers. The man who approves of himself becomes the man others desperately want approval from. She calls you crying about her job, her friends, her family, her past. You become her unpaid therapist, absorbing every drama like a sponge soaks up water. You listen to her problems with the dedication of a professional counselor and the availability of a 24-hour hotline. You solve her conflicts with surgical precision. You manage her crises with executive efficiency. You handle her emotions with therapeutic skill. You think being her emotional sanctuary makes you irreplaceable, that becoming her psychological safe harbor ensures your permanent place in her life, but you've transformed yourself from a person into a service, from a man into a utility, from a partner into a provider of emotional labor. She comes to you when she's broken and leaves when she's whole. She seeks you out when she's in crisis and forgets you exist when she's stable. She calls you when she needs healing and ignores you when she's healthy. You've trained her to see you as emotional infrastructure, always there, always functional, always available, but never exciting, never mysterious, never desirable. You're the emotional equivalent of plumbing, essential when it's not working, invisible when it is. The pattern becomes predictable and poisonous. Drama arrives, you respond. Crisis emerges, you solve it. Problems surface, you manage them. But between the storms, during the calm, when life is stable and peaceful, you discover that your services are no longer required. You've become her emotional janitor, cleaning up the messes of her psychological life while she moves through the world, creating new ones. You've positioned yourself as the solution to her problems, rather than the source of her joy. This creates a devastating dynamic. She associates you with her pain, not her pleasure. She thinks of you when things go wrong, not when things go right. She reaches for you when life is difficult, not when life is beautiful. You've become the person she calls when she's crying, not the person she calls when she's laughing. The individual she seeks when she's desperate, not when she's excited. The man she needs when she's broken, not when she's whole. The emotional labor error is the belief that being needed equals being wanted. But need and want are different psychological currencies. Need is about utility. Want is about desire. Need is about function. Want is about fascination. She needs her therapist, but she doesn't want to sleep with her therapist. She needs her emotional support system, but she doesn't want to build a life with her emotional support system. She needs her problem solver, but she doesn't want to be romantic with her problem-solver. The man who fixes everyone else becomes the one everyone abandons because fixing others requires sacrificing yourself. Managing their emotions requires neglecting your own. Solving their problems requires ignoring your own needs. You become so focused on being useful that you forget to be interesting. So dedicated to being helpful that you forget to be mysterious. So committed to being supportive that you forget to be challenging. Stop being her emotional janitor. Start being her emotional mystery. Let her problems be her problems. Let her drama be her drama. Let her crises be her responsibility. When she calls you crying, don't immediately offer solutions. When she shares her problems, don't automatically provide answers. When she seeks your emotional labor, don't automatically provide your services. Be selective about which emotional emergencies deserve your attention. Be strategic about which crises merit your involvement. Be protective of your emotional energy. The man who is always available for her problems becomes the man she never considers for her pleasures. You send her good morning texts every day. You call her every evening. You plan elaborate dates and surprise her with thoughtful gifts. You write her long messages expressing your feelings and shower her with compliments about her beauty, her intelligence, her uniqueness. You think persistence equals passion. You believe that consistent effort demonstrates genuine interest. You imagine that constant communication proves your sincerity, but pursuit without mystery becomes harassment. The hunter who reveals all his tactics loses his prey. When she knows exactly how much you want her, the game ends. When she can predict your every move, the excitement dies. When she understands your complete strategy, the challenge disappears. You've eliminated the very uncertainty that creates attraction. You've removed the questions that generate interest. You've destroyed the mystery that maintains fascination. Your predictable pursuit creates predictable boredom. Your constant communication becomes background noise. Your regular attention becomes routine expectation. She stops being excited. When you text because she knows you always text, she stops being grateful for your calls because she knows you always call. She stops being impressed by your gestures because she knows you always gesture. The pursuit paradox is cruel in its logic. The more you chase, the faster she runs. The more interest you show, the less interest she feels. The more available you make yourself, the less available she becomes. You've confused quantity with quality, frequency with value, persistence with attractiveness. You think more contact equals more connection, but oversaturation creates numbness, not sensation. Your eager pursuit sends unintended messages. It suggests that you have nothing better to do than think about her. It implies that your life lacks other interesting elements. It communicates that you're not a prize worth winning, because prizes don't chase their winners. The dynamic you've created is psychologically backward. Instead of her wondering when she hears from you, you wonder when she responds. Instead of her anticipating your attention, you anticipate her acknowledgement. Instead of her pursuing your interest, you pursue hers. Desire thrives in uncertainty, dies in certainty. The unknown creates excitement. The known creates complacency. Mystery generates magnetism. Transparency generates contempt. When she can predict your behavior, she stops being curious about your next move. When she knows your schedule, she stops wondering what you're doing. When she understands your routine, she stops being intrigued by your activities. Your eagerness becomes her boredom, because boredom is the natural response to predictability. Your consistency becomes her indifference, because indifference is the inevitable result of oversaturation. The most attractive people are not the most available people. They are the most selective people. They don't pursue everyone. They allow themselves to be pursued. They don't chase attention. They command it. They don't seek validation. They inspire it. Stop pursuing. Start retreating. Let the space you create become the invitation she accepts. When you stop chasing, she starts wondering. Wondering why. When you stop texting first, she starts initiating contact. When you stop being predictable, she starts being curious. The pursuit paradox resolves when you realize that the best hunters don't chase their prey, they position themselves where their prey will come to them. Your eagerness is not attractive, it's repulsive. Your availability is not appealing, it's boring. Your pursuit is not romantic, it's pathetic. Withdraw your attention. Create space. Become scarce. Let her pursue you for a change. 3 dates in, and you're already talking about marriage. You discuss children before you've seen her character under pressure. You plan vacations to places she mentioned once in passing. You talk about meeting her parents and introducing her to yours. You think showing commitment early proves your value. You believe that demonstrating long-term interest sets you apart from other men. You imagine that planning a future together creates security and attraction, but premature investment signals desperation, not devotion. Hasty commitment suggests scarcity mindset, not abundance thinking. Rapid future planning reveals your fear of loss, not your confidence in love. You've given her a relationship she didn't earn and security she didn't choose. You've awarded her the prize before she completed the competition. You've handed her the destination before she decided to take the journey. The future planning fallacy operates on a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. People value what they work for, not what they're given. They appreciate what they earn, not what they receive. They desire what they pursue, not what pursues them. By offering commitment before she's proven worthy of commitment, you've eliminated her need to prove anything. By providing security before she's demonstrated value, you've removed her motivation to demonstrate anything. By planning her future before she's shown investment in yours, you've destroyed her reason to invest anything. You've reversed the natural progression of relationships. Instead of commitment being the reward for proven compatibility, you've made it the starting point. Instead of security being earned through demonstrated value, you've made it a given. Instead of the future being built through shared experiences, you've made it an assumption. This creates a psychological phenomenon where she begins to take your commitment for granted, because commitment that comes to isolate has no value. She starts to question your standards because standards that include her automatically seem too low. She begins to wonder what's wrong with you that you're so eager to commit to someone you barely know. The future planning fallacy also reveals your desperation to lock her down before she discovers your flaws or finds better options. This defensive strategy backfires because it communicates exactly what you're trying to hide, that you don't believe you're good enough to keep her interested without contractual obligation. When you talk about marriage on the 3rd date, she doesn't think how romantic, she thinks how desperate. When you discuss children before you've seen her character, she doesn't think how committed, she thinks how naive. When you plan vacations together prematurely, she doesn't think how thoughtful, she thinks how presumptuous. You've confused investment with attraction, commitment with chemistry, planning with passion. But attraction requires uncertainty, chemistry requires challenge, and passion requires pursuit. The man who plans her future has already lost his own because he's handed over his power of choice to someone who hasn't proven worthy of that power. He's committed his resources to someone who hasn't committed anything in return. He's invested his time in someone who hasn't invested anything valuable. Commitment should be earned, not given. Security should be achieved, not provided. The future should be built, not assumed. Stop planning her future. Start building your own. Let her wonder if she has a place in your plans rather than assuming she's the center of them. Let her work to earn your commitment rather than receiving it as a participation trophy. Let her prove her value before you. Offer your most valuable resource, your exclusive attention. The future belongs to those who make others eager to be part of it, not to those who desperately try to include others in it. When she's excited, you become animated. When she's melancholy, you turn somber. When she's angry, you reflect her frustration. When she's anxious, you absorb her worry. You match her energy like a chameleon matches its environment, thinking this synchronization creates harmony. You've become her emotional echo, reflecting back whatever she projects. When she speaks loudly, you raise your voice. When she whispers, you lower yours. When she's passionate about something, you suddenly develop the same passion. When she dislikes something, you discover you dislike it too. You think this mirroring creates connection, that emotional synchronization builds intimacy, that becoming what she wants proves your compatibility. But you've erased yourself to become her reflection. She looks at you and sees herself comfortable, predictable, boring. The emotional mirror mistake is one of the most insidious because it feels like empathy while functioning as self-destruction. You believe you're being understanding when you're actually being invisible. You think you're being supportive when you're actually being absent. Every time you mirror her emotions instead of maintaining your own, you lose a piece of your identity. Every time you echo her thoughts instead of expressing yours, you diminish your presence. Every time you reflect her energy instead of generating your own, you fade a little more. You've become so accommodating that you've disappeared entirely. So agreeable that you've become forgettable. So synchronized that you've become redundant. She doesn't need another version of herself. She already has one. She doesn't want her emotions reflected back to her. She wants them challenged, balanced, complemented by someone who brings different energy to the interaction. The man who becomes what she wants stops being what she needs. What she needs is contrast, not conformity. Challenge, not compliance. Mystery, not mirroring. When you constantly adjust your emotional temperature to match hers, you communicate that you have no internal thermostat. When you continuously modify your opinions to align with hers, you reveal that you have no core beliefs. When you persistently change your energy to synchronize with hers, you demonstrate that you have no authentic self. This emotional mirroring creates a psychological phenomenon where she begins to feel like she's in a relationship with herself. The excitement of discovering someone different, of being challenged by another perspective, of being complemented by contrasting energy, of this disappears when you become her emotional clone. She stops being curious about your thoughts, because your thoughts are just echoes of hers. She stops being interested in your opinions, because your opinions are just reflections of hers. She stops being attracted to your energy because your energy is just a mirror of hers. The relationship becomes psychologically claustrophobic because there's no space, no difference, no contrast. She can predict your every emotional response because it's just a delayed version of her own. She can anticipate your every reaction because it's just a reflection of her action. You've eliminated the very dynamics that create attraction, tension, difference, challenge, mystery. You've created a psychological echo chamber where only her voice exists, bounced back to her through your compliant mirroring. Stop being her emotional mirror. Start being her emotional contrast. When she's anxious, be calm. When she's chaotic, be stable. When she's emotional, be rational. When she's reactive, be responsive. Bring different energy to balance hers, not the same energy to amplify it. Maintain your own emotional center, regardless of her emotional weather. Keep your own perspective, regardless of her point of view. Preserve your own energy, regardless of her emotional state. The man who disappears into her emotions becomes invisible to her desire. The person who has no emotional independence has nothing emotionally attractive to offer. Be yourself, not her reflection. She fell for you, not for another version of herself. Emotional unavailability isn't cruelty, it's sovereignty. It's the recognition that your inner world is not public property, that your emotional landscape is not a tourist destination, that your psychological depths are not entertainment for others' curiosity. It's understanding that mystery creates magnetism while transparency creates contempt, that the known becomes boring while the unknown becomes irresistible, that what is easily accessed loses its value while what requires effort to reach becomes precious. You don't withdraw to punish, you withdraw to protect your power. You don't become unavailable to hurt others, you become unavailable to preserve yourself. You don't create distance to play games. You create distance to maintain your psychological sovereignty. The moment you become emotionally scarce, you become emotionally valuable. Not because scarcity creates artificial value, but because scarcity protects authentic value from being depleted, diluted, destroyed by those who don't appreciate what they easily access. This isn't about games. It's about reclaiming the throne of your own mind. It's about recognizing that your thoughts, feelings, and inner experiences belong to you first, and sharing them is a privilege you grant, not a right others possess. You've been conditioned to believe that emotional availability equals emotional maturity, that sharing everything equals authenticity, that having no boundaries equals having great love. But these equations are false, and they lead to psychological bankruptcy. The emotionally unavailable man is not emotionally broken. He is emotionally protected. He is not incapable of feeling. He is selective about what he feels and with whom he shares those feelings. He is not damaged, he is discerning. Guard your depths like a treasure, because that's what they are. Let them wonder what lies beneath the surface you show them. Let them question what thoughts move through your mind. Let them be curious about what emotions live in your heart. Your availability is not a human right, it's a human privilege. Your emotional access is not public property, it's private territory. Your inner world is not an open house. Sits a fortress with selective admission. The people who are frustrated by your emotional unavailability are the same people who would abuse your emotional availability. The individuals who demand your transparency are the same individuals who would exploit your vulnerability. The ones who insist on your openness are the same ones who would weaponize your honesty. True connection happens between two complete people, not between one person and their emotional reflection. Real intimacy develops between two mysteries gradually revealing themselves to each other, not between an open book and its eager reader. Emotional unavailability is not the opposite of love, it's the prerequisite for healthy love. It's the recognition that you cannot give what you don't possess, cannot share what you haven't protected, cannot offer what you've allowed others to deplete. The return to power begins with the return to privacy, with the recognition that some thoughts are too valuable to share, some feelings too precious to display, some experiences too sacred to commodify for others' consumption. If you recognize yourself in these patterns, if you see how emotional availability became emotional slavery, if you understand how transparency became self-destruction, then you're ready for the transformation. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming selective. Not about shutting down, it's about shutting out what doesn't serve you. Not about emotional death, it's about emotional rebirth. Under your own terms, subscribe, not because you want to learn how to manipulate others, but because you want to stop being manipulated by your own need for their approval. Not because you want to hurt people, but because you want to stop hurting yourself. Not because you want to play games, but because you want to stop being played. The emotionally unavailable man is not the villain of the story, he's the hero of his own story. He's the man who chose his own sovereignty over others' expectations, his own boundaries over others' demands, his own power over others' comfort. Guard your depths, protect your power, maintain your mystery. Let them wonder what lies beneath the surface. The surface is all they've earned the right to see. The throne of your mind belongs to you. It's time to reclaim it. You've seen the traps now. The confession that becomes an inventory of weakness. The availability that becomes background noise. The validation seeking that becomes emotional dependency. The emotional labor that becomes exploitation. The pursuit that becomes desperation. The future planning that becomes premature investment. The mirroring that becomes self-erasure. Each one a small death. Each one a piece of your power handed over to someone who didn't earn it, doesn't deserve it, won't protect it. But understanding the traps is only the beginning. Now comes the harder part, building the fortress. Emotional unavailability is not cruelty, is sovereignty. It is the recognition that your inner world is not public property, that your thoughts are not community resources, that your heart is not a democracy where others get to vote on your feelings. It is the understanding that mystery creates magnetism, while transparency breeds contempt. That absence intensifies presence, while constant availability destroys value. That the man who reveals nothing becomes the riddle everyone wants to solve. This is not about games. This is not about manipulation. This is about recognizing the fundamental mathematics of human psychology, that want is born from lack, that desire thrives in uncertainty, that the heart wants most what it cannot have. The emotionally unavailable man guards his depths. He lets them wonder what lies beneath the surface. He makes his attention scarce, his approval conditional, his presence valuable. He doesn't withdraw to punish, he withdraws to protect his power. He understands that every word he doesn't speak is a word they can't use against him. Every emotion he doesn't display is a weapon they can't turn upon him. Every vulnerability he doesn't expose is a weakness they can't exploit. This is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming strategic. Not about being cruel, but about being careful. Not about hurting others, but about protecting yourself. The world will tell you this is wrong, that emotional availability is virtue, that vulnerability is strength, that openness is love. The world is lying to you. The world wants you weak, dependent, controllable, predictable, but you are none of these things. You are a fortress. You are a mystery. You are a man who understands that his inner life is his own, that his emotional world belongs to him, that his depth is not for public consumption. Guard your depths, protect your mystery, maintain your unavailability. The moment you become emotionally Scarce, you become emotionally valuable. This is not theory, this is law. This is not opinion, this is reality. You are no longer the man who explains, who pursues, who mirrors, who confesses. You are the man who withdraws, who guards, who protects, who chooses. You are emotionally unavailable, and that makes you irresistible. If this message has awakened something in you, if you recognize the man you were and see the man you could become, then subscribe. Not for entertainment, not for trends, but for transformation, for the ongoing education in psychological warfare that is modern life. Because this is just the beginning, and you have a fortress to build.